Welcome to Monster Mondays. My name is Matt and this is my YouTube channel, Matt in a Hat. This is a discussion and information channel for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, an epic tabletop role-playing game from the talented folks at Paizo. Please remember to like, subscribe and ring the bell below for notifications. And if you're feeling extra generous or want to chat about anything Pathfinder 2nd Edition, please leave a comment, even if it is just #for-the-algorithm. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for not being able to make a Thursday video last week. I had some hefty personal stuff come up, but I'm back on track now, and I'm looking forward to making content this week. We looked at Grimple and Hanover last week, and I learned some things from that video. This week, we look at elemental wisps, which can be found in Bestiary 3. Wisps are tiny elemental beings that emerged during the creation of the elemental planes. The first wisps roamed the inner sphere in shifting symphonies that traded members with their every meeting. These symphonies of free wisps created music out of their combined resonances, but when the evil elemental lords realized the value of the wisps' resonance, they captured whole symphonies for use as servants. Wisps are tuned to each other and to those that they surround themselves with. This attunement makes them naturally supportive allies. Free wisps still roam the inner sphere and the material plane, but they are usually shy and hide themselves from strangers. However, they happily offer their services to those who show them kindness. They especially find themselves drawn to spellcasters who practice elemental magic. These wisps usually watch from afar, but sometimes approach those who seem safe to become familiars or comrades. Free wisps who find one another become close almost immediately. They get especially excited when they find wisps of elements other than their own, showing none of the animosity some elementals exhibit toward other types. Instead, they join in an excited dance, emitting resonances that faintly echo the symphonies of ancient days. And speaking of those symphonies, dozens or even hundreds of wisps of all types can gather in a wisp symphony, usually with one or more wisp conductors. These groups are rare now that the majority of their kind exists in servitude to the elemental lords, but a few free symphonies still roam the elemental planes, and legends tell of the transcendent songs they produce together. These groups of wisps use the rules for a swarm and don't accord essence, which is one of the wisp's main abilities. But collectively they can produce damaging area effects or even cast certain spells. Wisp conductors are the leaders of wisp symphonies. Conductors are usually at least 3 levels higher than the wisps presented in the Bestiary 3, and they have a charisma modifier to reflect their leadership. They're also typically trained in performance and command basic spellcasting abilities as well as other special abilities that can be similar to a bard. You could even give one bard class levels if you wished. So, on to air wisp first. Air wisps have a high dexterity, moderate wisdom, and low strength, intelligence, and charisma. They have moderate perception, but they do have dark vision. Acrobatics and stealth are both in the high range for their level, while plane of air lore is low. The Air Wisp has armor class in the extreme range. Their reflex is high, while their fortitude and will saves are low. They have 10 hit points, which is in the low range for a level 0 creature, but they do have immunity to bleed, paralysed, poison, and sleep. Air Wisps are incredibly fast, with a fly speed of 40 feet, so getting around is a breeze. Air Wisps can speak Auran, and they have a melee reach attack, which is a 10-foot reach, with their tendrils, with a high attack bonus, but low damage. With their acrobatic skill, Air Wisps especially, can maneuver in flight. This means with their trained skill that they could approach a steep ascent or descent, and there is a possibility for a Game Master to increase their trained expertise to expert and make them able to fly against the wind and hover in midair, or even just give them those abilities if you wish. Furthermore, with their acrobatic skill, Air Wisps are really good at balancing, tumbling through, and squeezing, as you might expect. They also have a high stealth, so they could conceal an object, but more than likely that's not probably what they're going to be doing unless they have some sort of very rare or precious object that is related to the element that they are, but they would more than likely hide and sneak, especially given how they operate normally. So I want to talk a little bit about resonance. Now, all Wisps have the resonance ability, and this is what that is. So all Wisps vibrate at a frequency attuned to their element, resonating with the empowering all creatures and effects sharing the trait. A creature in an area gains a +1 status bonus to attack and to damage rolls for effects with the same trait. In this case, it's an air trait. A creature with the elemental and air traits gains this bonus to all attack and damage rolls, even if the specific ability isn't or doesn't have the air trait. So Air Wisps in particular have a 30-foot resonance aura with the air trait. All Wisps also, unless they're in a symphony, can accord essence. This is a reaction. The trigger is an ally within 30 feet that benefited from the Wisp's resonance in the last hour and is targeted by an attack. The effect is the Wisp detonates itself in a small elemental explosion, and this explosion gives temporary hit points equal to half the Wisp's current hit points. And this temporary hit points is to all allies within 30 feet that have benefited from the Wisp's resonance in the last hour, and those temporary hit points last an hour. This can be a massive boost in temporary hit points and something that can really come in handy. So a Wisp that uses this reaction, though, is permanently destroyed. It can only be restored by a wish spell or a similarly powerful effect. So if an ability would prevent the Wisp's destruction, for instance if the Wisp is summoned and would merely be dismissed, Accord Essence has no effect. And finally, we have an In Concert ability. So when an Air Wisp, in this case, rolls a critical failure on a check to aid, they instead get a failure, and when they roll a success, they get a critical success instead. So Wisps are incredible at aiding other creatures. And And onto the Earth Wisp. So, Earth Wisps have high constitution, moderate strength and wisdom, and low dexterity, intelligence, and charisma. They have a moderate perception, but with dark vision and imprecise tremor sense out to 40 feet. Athletics is in the high range for their level, while Plane of Earth Lore and Dungeon Lore are low. The Earth Wisp has armor class in the high range, and their fortitude and reflex are moderate, while their will save is low. They have 15 hit points, which is in the moderate range for a level 0 creature, and they do have immunity to bleed, paralyzed, poison, and sleep, and they have resistance 2 to bludgeoning damage. They are a bit slow and plodding with a speed of 20 feet, but they can also burrow just as far. Earth Wisps speak Terran. And they have a melee reach attack with their tendrils with a moderate attack bonus and moderate damage. Earth Wisps have a 30-foot resonance aura with the Earth trait. Being that they have high athletics, Earth Wisps are really good at climbing, forcing things open. They might grapple. They're good at high and long jumping. They can shove. I'm not sure that they would actually swim, but that is amongst the athletics special abilities, as well as being able to trip and disarm. So they can be real melee powerhouses with disarm, trip, grapple, and shove. So pretty awesome. And onto the Fire Wisp. So Fire Wisps have high dexterity, moderate strength, constitution and wisdom, and low intelligence and charisma. They have a moderate perception, but they ignore the concealed condition from smoke. Stealth is in the high range for their level, while acrobatics is moderate, and Plane of Fire Lore is low. The Fire Wisp has armor class in the high range. Their fortitude and reflex are moderate, and their will save is low. They have 18 hit points, which is definitely in the high range for a level 0 creature, and they do have immunity to bleed, paralyzed, poison, and sleep, but they have a weakness too to cold and water. They have a fast land speed of 40 feet, slow fly speed of only 15 feet. They speak Ignan, and they have a melee reach attack with their tendrils with a moderate attack bonus and low damage, but it comes bundled with persistent fire damage. That can come in very handy and be very annoying. As Fire Wisps in this case, have a 30-foot resonance aura with the fire trait. And finally here we have Water Wisps. Water Wisps have high constitution, moderate strength, dexterity and wisdom, and low intelligence and charisma. They have moderate perception but ignore the concealed condition from mist and fog. Medicine is in the high range for their level, while athletics and Plane of Water Lore are low. The Water Wisp has armor class in the lower moderate range. Their fortitude is high, while their reflex and will saves are low. They have 20 hit points, which is in the highest of ranges for a level 0 creature, and they do have immunity to bleed, paralyzed, poison and sleep, and they have a resistance 2 to fire damage. They have a speed of 25 feet and can swim just as far. They speak Aquan and have a melee reach with their tendrils with a moderate attack bonus and damage in the high range. Water Wisps have a 30-foot resonance aura with the water trait. So let's speak a little bit about medicine. Obviously, Water Wisps would be able to recall knowledge about medicine to a fairly high degree, and while they don't have a healer's kit, they wouldn't be able to do the other medicine's actions, But what you could do as a game master is potentially offer something in the environment that would allow them to interact with that thing, perhaps a plant, some coral, something interesting like that, where whatever that thing is would give the benefits of a healer's kit. And in that case, they would be able to administer first aid, treat disease, treat poison, and treat wounds. I think that is a really awesome interaction and something that would be very interesting in a battle. Water Wisps, interestingly, also have the Drench single action ability. So the Wisp puts out all fires in a single 5-foot square with this ability, and it extinguishes non-magical fire of that size or smaller automatically. It can attempt to counteract magical fires with a counteract modifier of +6. So, on to some interactions here. Air wisps are floating spheres of cloud and storm. They are perpetually humming a light, whispery tone. They're playful and capricious, with great curiosity towards strangers. So, depending on where they are, they can maybe appear in a large amount, like an actual approaching storm. Perhaps that could be an omen of some description if all of these air wisps were together and looked like an approaching storm. Potentially climbing up a mountain, you could start to hear this light humming and see these small floating spheres around, and because they're playful and very curious, they might come out of hiding more frequently than others, and they might come up to investigate. Perhaps they don't know their own abilities. Perhaps they would try and interact with a party who are suspicious. Perhaps this could lead to some sort of combat encounter. There's all sorts of things that could happen with air wisps. Earth wisps are rolling spheres of rock, mud, and leaves, perpetually humming with low, rumbling energy. They're timid and aloof, but fiercely loyal to those they know and trust. And so in this case, potentially some earth wisps could be hiding in a cave, maybe even under some mud or in some mud. They could be rumbling, which if in a greater number, that could scare the party somehow into thinking that there's something bigger down there, or potentially that there's some sort of environmental issue with this area, earthquakes, that sort of thing, depending on how many of these earth wisps are around. Fire wisps are sizzling spheres of flame and ash, perpetually crackling and shimmering with heat. They're carefree, they're boisterous, quick to action, and sometimes recklessly so. I would definitely key into that recklessness and use them to get up close and personal with the party. They don't really care about what's going on, or perhaps their own safety, and they're definitely going to be quick to react to people nearby, especially if they're threatening some sort of lava pool or something like that they might be guarding. And finally, water wisps are swimming spheres of foam and water. Perpetually, they hum with a wash of soft sounds. They're gentle, nurturing, and quick to help anyone in need. So, water wisps are probably, other than the air wisps, the most helpful, the most nurturing, the most likely to come up and assist the party Potentially things that you could do is have them in, across some sort of raging river that the party is trying to cross, maybe a lake, have them assisting the party with their checks, which would make it really interesting. There's all sorts of cool interactions that you can do with all of these wisps. So on to a couple of possible scenarios where you could run wisps. So first of all, we have allies. Higher level elemental creatures could have wisp allies. Wisps boost all of the abilities of elemental creatures, and so something that is usually not as much of a threat to the party could quickly become much more of a threat in this case, where the Wisp allies are all boosting their abilities, and wow, it could really change how something that maybe wouldn't be considered as much of a threat normally, suddenly with all of these wisps willing to sacrifice themselves, willing to aid, willing to assist their abilities, become much, much more of a threat. You could use them as summons. So spellcasters could have wisps summoned, boosting all of their abilities of a certain element. And I would say that this is a fairly frequent thing that would happen, especially with perhaps lower level spellcasters. The caveat with summoning wisps is that it is a second level slot that you're using to summon these wisps, and they are challenge 0, where normally you'd be able to summon up to a challenge 1 with a level 2 spell slot. So potentially there is a gap there in power, but if you look at the wisp stats, they're actually quite on par with other elemental creatures of level 1, and so I would actually think that they're actually better in a lot of cases, considering that they do boost the abilities of that particular spellcaster. And potentially allies of the spellcaster too, that might have abilities with those elemental tags. In the party, the summon elemental spell could be employed by someone, and they can assist anyone in the party who has spells or abilities with the same keyword as the elemental wisp. And we could have them as elemental guardians. I was talking about this a little bit before, but they could have made a home and be protecting an elemental manifest zone, perhaps an airy, a cave, volcano, springs, those sorts of things. And if the party gets too close, or if they feel like they're going to be a danger to this area, the wisps could strike into action, especially if it's a fire wisp, but other wisps too, just to protect their local area. My final scenario here, but certainly not the end. There are so many awesome scenarios you could use wisps here. These are just some ideas, but my last idea here for today is a summoning gone wrong. So students at a local magic academy, or perhaps a druid grove, or maybe a singular wild mage out in the wild could have attempted to summon friendly wisps, but they have come out enraged or otherwise hostile. The party has to come in and help. So, for a level 1 party of 4 characters, 2 wisps is a low threat, 3 is a moderate threat, 4 is a severe threat, and 5 is an extreme threat. In my homebrew games, which are made for newer players or fewer players, I would consider 2 wisps a moderate threat and 3 to be a severe threat. For a party of level 2, again with 4 characters, 3 Wisps is a moderate threat, 3 is a low rather, 4 is a moderate, 6 is a severe, and 8 is an extreme threat. Again, in my homebrew games, because there's fewer players or newer players, I would use the threats as presented for level 1 for characters to ensure to measure that difficulty. Alright, and we come to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell below for notifications. And, as I said earlier, if you're feeling extra generous or want to chat about anything Pathfinder 2nd Edition, please leave a comment, even if it is just #for_the-algorithm. My next video will be on Thursday or Friday, depending on how I go with my scheduling, and we'll address the acrobatics skill. Again, an apology for last week. I hope you will tune in then, and also next Monday for the next installment of Monster Mondays. I'll see you then.